Hey, thanks for checking out the video. If you all like it, please like and subscribe, and hope you all enjoy it. Have a great rest of the day.
A pair of welted pumps, so a little more sturdy than what I'm wearing, a little less robust than those ones, and I wore them every day. Wore them every day. All kinds of weather. In Williamsburg, when they get snow and ice, they put sand on those bricks, and that just is like walking on sandpaper. So I was pretty. It was a good torture test. And after 5 years, they were still going. They had been resoled about 7 times, either half soles or. We were just discussing that with a fellow just a minute ago, and there's no real good solid answer about that because different people, it's like asking, how long does your car last? Yeah. Well, how do you drive it? How good a car did you buy? Where do you drive it, right? Same with shoes. Those things are all going to factor in. But probably most people aren't wearing a pair of shoes out anyway. In a certain situation where there's an alarm, and maybe people have retreated to a frontier fort like this, and maybe they're having to make do a little more. But the average person and the majority of the settlement in the colonies is probably buying multiple pairs of shoes every year because of changing fashions. They weren't terribly expensive, like we've been led to believe, and I think a lot of times people have the idea that these people only had like one suit of clothes and maybe one pair of shoes and they just had to make do. That would be extremely rare. Even in Virginia, just to the north, at a minimum by law, if you have a slave, you have to by law give them 2 pairs of shoes every year. British soldiers, 2 pairs of shoes a year, plus sole leather to resole them and reheel them twice is standard regulation, right? So even the people that are probably the lowest in society are getting at least 2 pairs of shoes every year. And then Reese, who is catering, a shoemaker that catered more to the middling sort, what we would call working class folks, he thought that 4 pairs of shoes a year was pretty common for an Englishman to wear. So.
Are they comfortable? Is what we were discussing.
Yeah, they're much more comfortable than modern shoes.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
For reference, these are assembled with more modern techniques but more historical styling. In these and stays, so my support garment, I have run a mile, no problems. And in order to run a mile in modern shoes, I have to wear, a very padded shoe or my feet hurt. Not at all a problem because these shoes, because they move with your foot and they allow your foot to breathe, it's much, and in a lot of ways it's not actually as heavy as you would think either. That I wear a woman's 9.5 wide, and there's a wooden heel in there, like this, but that heel itself is actually lighter than the heel on most modern shoes. And so that shoe will bend and move with my foot in a way that so many modern shoes just don't.
And unfortunately, women don't have really, even the most expensive shoes you can buy with all the nice names are really, you can spend $2,000, $3,000 for certain women's shoes that have a good name to them, but the quality of them is really not that good. Women have after the decline of shoemaking in the 19th century, women really got the short end of the stick on that one. Men, on the other hand, there has been a preserved tradition of this kind of shoemaking amongst men's higher end men's shoes today. You can still buy them. And I was in London about 4 months ago doing research, and I visited the shop of John Lobb, which is an old shop where they've retained that tradition. It's probably the best known shop for that. And we were talking as I was doing a tour downstairs, and we were comparing how they made these men's wingtips and Oxfords and Darbys versus the way shoes I make for 18th century shoes. I can make those types of shoes too. But they were discussing it, and they observed, wow, it sounds like you make shoes just exactly like we do. If you were to buy a pair of Lobb shoes and go into 9 St. James Street, Royal Warrant, the whole bit, how much do you think you're going to spend for a pair of Lobb shoes? What's a lot to you? I asked them because I was curious about what their cheapest price was.
Wait a minute.
I was surprised.
Several hundred, not on.
You'd be really surprised. What's that? More. More than 1,000.
2,000.
More than 2,000.
10,000.
Okay, 6,000 pounds. So you're looking at 80 to 8,500 American dollars, and that's just to get a pair of shoes that's made the same way these were made. Now in the 18th century, they weren't expensive because a handmade shoe in a handmade world is just another handmade item.
Right.
But a handmade shoe in a machine-made world, there's where the difference lies. So yeah, there's a big difference today. Unfortunately, our shoes just can't compare with the way the shoes were made in the 18th century. And in terms of, like Hannah said, the health for your foot, the ability to walk in a natural. One of the things that we have a lot of padding and arch support in our shoes, right? And we think that's a good idea. Studies, kinesiology studies from UCLA, Stanford, other places like that, are indicating that those shoes affect the way we walk and will place somewhere between 50 to 70 times more strain on our hip and knee joints than we were designed for. So if you wonder why everybody's getting hip replacements and knee replacements, it's probably because we've been wearing these heavily padded shoes that cause us to walk differently. So, a lot of people, the first thing they're like, well, this is all I've got. This is all what do I do? I can't go out and spend 6,000 pounds on a pair of. So for men, I usually tell men, if you can find vintage shoes that were maybe made like in the 1960s or 1970s, high quality shoes, a lot of not all of them, they still usually have a rigid shank, which I don't like, but they at least a lot more better quality materials. They're going to shape a little bit better to your feet. They're going to allow you to flex and move a little more the way you're designed to.
Things that like the military would have worn versus like everyday folk.
The military, I mean, it depends on what you mean by the military. If you're talking about provincial soldiers, they're getting whatever gets shipped to them, from shoemakers anywhere they can find them, right? Because they're trying to supply, in a colonial setting where it's hard to find enough shoes, they're just taking whatever they can get, okay? Now, if you're talking about a British soldier in Europe, you're getting higher quality shoes that are being done on a contract basis, where there's a certain sense of, we see them actually marking the contract shoes with the initials of the maker, and the purpose of that, we believe, is to be able to trace it back if you get poor quality shoes, right? So we do see a distinction, but in a colonial setting, it seems that you're getting whatever you can get. And that's one of the things we find is interesting when we find these shoes archaeologically in frontier settings. Oftentimes we find shoes that should be maybe 5 to 10 years out of fashion, all right, for the period that we find them, right? We think, so what is that? Is that just because that's what people were accustomed to, where they have maybe a more Germanic heritage, where they held on to older styles longer than the English people did? Or was it a situation of, some agent for the deputy quartermaster general goes to a contractor, a shoe shop, and says, I need, 300 pair of shoes. Do you have anything? He says, yeah, I got a barrel of a bunch of old ones I couldn't sell in the back. I'll give you a good deal on them. We don't know. So, but you do see a difference between the two, between the way the provincial things work and the ideals of the British Army.
That's great.